From Josh Giddey's inconsistencies on the court making it unlikely for him to remain in OKC, to the Thunder possibly getting rid of him to increase their chances of making some noise in the playoffs, here's why Josh Giddey should be traded. Despite having a lot of potential and a promising start to his NBA career, Giddey's been having a tough time taking his game to the next level. The athlete was drafted at 6 in the 2021 draft for a reason. He's got the build and skills that'll allow him to have a great career once it's all said and done, but it seems unlikely for him to reach those heights in Oklahoma. He started off his NBA career with solid averages of 12.5 points per game, nearly 8 boards, and 6.4 assists, but his efficiency wasn't good since some nights he'd shoot well from the field, while on most others he'd be missing a lot of shots. As for his sophomore year, he definitely showed signs of improvement as he put up over 16 points a game, 7.9 rebounds, and 6.2 assists, while his shooting splits improved quite a bit. But now in the 2024 season, the issue of him being inconsistent has sprung up again. Unlike the 2023 season, he's not really doing much for OKC, and that's clear based on his averages of 11.6 points, 6.2 rebounds, and 4.6 assists. On top of that, his efficiency isn't anything too crazy either. The fact that he's been struggling to make an impact for OKC is also clear, based on the limited number of minutes he's played in the 2024 campaign compared to the past 2 seasons. The Thunder can see that he's not bringing much to the table, yet they're still thriving in a conference as competitive as the West, so it's clear that they don't need him. Keeping all of this in mind, it only makes sense to assume that the Thunder are thinking about possibly trading him. Not to mention, his reputation has taken a major hit as of late because of the scandal involving an underage girl. When news broke out that Josh was in a relationship with a minor, Liv Cook, the NBA world went wild, and soon he was the subject of a lot of criticism and vicious memes comparing him to Karl Malone. Since then, he's been playing some of the worst basketball of his career, and the entire situation must have also played a part in his being so inconsistent. What's more, trading him would also allow the Thunder to get rid of someone who's looked down upon by the rest of the league, and since they really don't need him, there's no reason to keep him. And speaking of not needing Giddey's services anymore, let's talk more about the current OKC roster and how the Australian doesn't fit in well with them. Back in the 2022 season, it was mainly Shai Gilgeous-Alexander who was running the show in OKC, so the Aussie got more chances to shine. But then, in 2022, the Thunder drafted Jalen Williams, and in 2023, they drafted Chet. And during their 2024 campaign, it's clear as day that the trio of Shai, Chet, and Williams is the center of attention in OKC. They do practically everything for the team, and that's meant fewer minutes for Josh. The pairing of Shai and Giddey is particularly unsuccessful out on the court, and that's not surprising since they're both ball-dominant players. Both men can be effective playmakers, but because of this overlap, things don't run as smoothly on offense as they'd like. And the fact that they don't play well together is evident based on the numbers. Josh Giddey's played in 26 games without SGA, and in those, he averaged 16.4 points per game, 8 rebounds, and 7.3 dimes, while his efficiency was pretty great too. As for Shai, he's played 20 games without Josh by his side, and he's put up fantastic stats of 31 points per contest, 7 assists, and 5.5 boards while having great shooting splits. On top of that, when SGA played by himself in the 2023 season, which was for a total of 1,005 minutes, OKC had a terrific net rating of plus 8.51. But during the 1,004 hour and 11 minutes they played together, that rating dropped all the way to minus 1.53. And when Giddey played by himself, the rating was even worse at minus 4.09. When both players were off the court, the rating was at plus 0.5. Clearly, SGA was perfectly fine on his own, while Giddey wasn't really needed as he rarely made the team any better. It's pretty rare for a pair to play so many minutes together yet perform so terribly. In fact, of the 98 duos that played at least 1,400 minutes in the 2023 season, Giddey and SGA ranked 78th in net rating. But why are they such a terrible pairing? Well, one problem is that Josh hasn't shown any signs of improving his jumper, especially from downtown. And if he wants to thrive alongside a star like Shai, then he needs to shoot more of them and drain them with ease. Josh has a career shooting percentage of 30% from deep, and those numbers are disappointingly low, given the fact that he barely shoots threes. After all, if you're just shooting 3.3 trays a game, you should be able to drain at least 36 to 38% of them. That doesn't seem like it'll happen though. Giddey's only good at cutting to the basket, something Shea can already do, so if he were a floor spacer instead, their numbers together would be far better. And as I told you earlier, their roles kind of overlap since they both are at their best when they're heading the offense. Just look at how good Giddey was for Australia last year in the World Cup when he was the main guy. For example, during the World Cup, we saw that Giddey's great at driving to the basket, especially when it comes to sinking floaters. But that ability doesn't shine while playing with SGA, who's been the league leader in drives per game for years. On top of all that, Josh isn't the best defender either. Since Shea's the star of the team, he needs the other guard on the team to handle the toughest defensive assignments on a nightly basis, or else he'd be super fatigued. But Josh doesn't fulfill that role since he's a pretty weak defender, and that's disappointing given his height and wingspan. Even though he can bully guards on offense, it's not hard for smaller guards to get past him or score on him. So of course, it only makes sense to trade him for someone who can shoot threes and also play defense. At the end of the day, that'll only make the team better and more well-rounded. Now that brings us to the question, who should they trade him for? Considering the fact that they need someone who can score threes and play elite defense, the first name that comes to mind is Mikal Bridges. I know Bridges is worth a lot more than just Josh Giddey, but OKC has a lot of assets they could use to sweeten the deal. He'd be the perfect fit alongside Shea because he can do everything Giddey couldn't while not coming in SGA's way. Mikal's one of the best two-way players in the league, and making a splash for him would be very worth it. If not him, then they should try and land Malcolm Brogdon because he's a guard who can drain threes with high efficiency while also playing great defense, making him an ideal player to pair alongside SGA. Of course, there are more options, but the main point that I'm trying to make is that if OKC wants to do some damage in the playoffs, then Giddey needs to go. Sure, it's not like Giddey's an inherently terrible player. As I told you earlier, he's got a lot of potential. And if he's in the right place, he can blossom into a great player. But that's not happening in Oklahoma. He needs to find a new home where he can be the main man on offense, being the primary playmaker, while also having more chances to showcase his scoring skills from inside the arc. And most importantly, his leaving will be good for the team since they'll get a player who fits better with the roster. Come playoff time, that'll be huge. After all, OKC's a great team, probably one of the best in the NBA right now. But they're pretty young, and it's likely for them to mess up in the postseason, especially if they keep Giddey on the squad. The terrible numbers from the SGA-Giddey duo can be ignored in the regular season, but that won't be the case in the playoffs, where there's no margin for error. Keeping everything in mind, along with the fact that Josh isn't playing too well for the Thunder this season, I think it's a no-brainer that the franchise needs to trade him for a player that'll help the franchise do some serious damage when the lights are shining bright. But the clock's ticking, so they better act fast, or else OKC will have nothing but regular season successes to show for this campaign. So, from the Thunder possibly getting rid of Josh to increase their chances of making some noise in the playoffs, to Giddey's inconsistencies on the court making it unlikely for him to remain in OKC, that was why Josh Giddey should be traded.